In today's video, we're finally going to do our first flight of the EVO Max 4T. This is one of the most highly anticipated flights since nobody's really seen a lot of the new Autel flying. So today's video, we're going to do just that. I'm going to give you some initial impressions and thoughts. Unfortunately, we're not going to really get a chance to test the thermals in their proper environment, but we should get a good indication on how the range is, how it flies, and the RGB zoom camera and the wide angle sensor. Let's get started. All right, I went ahead and got the screen recording started. So we're gonna go ahead and take this out over by the power lines, see how it does. I'm gonna keep it relatively high. We're gonna test out the zoom capabilities. We're gonna test out some of these AI features because I think to me, that is the most interesting thing. All right, let's give it a go. It's the first time we're flying it. It's actually pretty quiet for how big it is. So let me pull it back away from me here. Wow, it flies really good. All right, so let's go ahead first. Let's test out this AI feature here. Got this new AI recognition. So right now it's detecting me as a person, which I think is pretty cool. If my understanding, yeah, so it's actually detecting my Jeep as a truck, which is pretty cool. So it has the ability to track things, and then we can go ahead and measure the distance from the aircraft to the object, which it's coming up at 21 meters. So pretty neat. So that's the AI feature, and I think one of the coolest features about the Max 4T. So I'm not gonna really judge the camera quality because that's not what this drone is about. I do, however, want to fly it out across this golf course here. Again, not really caring too much about the camera quality. I'm more or less just caring about how well it flies, the zoom capability, and just overall, I guess, battery life and performance. So I can see it right out in front of us here. And let's just go ahead and test some things here. Camera controls are much more refined, which is sort of nice. Transmission still seems really nice. There we are there. We're actually over somebody's property, so let me get away from there. So there's the clubhouse. Now, one thing I did find out when talking to John McBride at AVUSI, he was telling me that the zoom doesn't have a toggle to go from the zoom camera to the wide angle, so you actually have to zoom. So I have to zoom in on this. So you can see right there, it just flipped over to the zoom camera. So there is the truck. We're gonna keep zooming. We're at 7.8 times. You can see I'm right there. That is a hot aircraft. So there I am right here. That's 80 times zoom. Is it even usable at that? Can we read the lettering on my truck? I could barely make out the lettering on the truck. It's 109 times, that's digital zoom. You can see me, you can barely see the lettering on the truck. So it's not like super usable at that range, but that is still pretty impressive. Now, a lot of that's gonna be in part to the fact that this has a 8K sensor, so we're able to really sort of zoom in on things a little bit. Opposed to other camera systems where you can't really get that much resolution. So that's actually pretty usable from that extent there. Let's go ahead, we'll bring it back closer now. As far as the camera goes, I have the camera, it's just in auto, I believe. Let's just double check things. Yeah, it's pretty much in auto there. Throw some grid lines up there. Not that, again, this is not a camera that we're looking to do anything really cinematic with. But let's go ahead and see. Oh, you can turn the brightness of the screen. So everything is sort of dumbed down, simplified. So you can just sort of turn the image brightness down. Like there's not an actual ISO value. It just lets you turn the brightness of the image down or up, which is pretty interesting. So let's see what happens here. We're far away now, so now let's go ahead and turn on AI recognition. And you can see it's picking up all these vehicles, which I think is so cool. So you can see all those little dots. Those are all vehicles that the AI is recognizing. Now this is very similar to what Skydio does. Skydio has something similar like this where it'll actually show vehicles or subjects. And I gotta say, at an altitude, it's pretty quiet. So this is neat. It can even pick up a small object there. Now, John was saying that eventually you'll be able to tap on a subject and be able to track things. Now that could be pretty dangerous when you're tracking a moving object like this, being super fast, but I love the little icons for the vehicles. I think that is so cool. Let's see if it can also detect me as a human. So it can detect me as a human, which is pretty neat. It's actually seeing me. You can look in the far right-hand corner and you can actually see it's detecting me as a subject, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know, I find that to be really sort of useful. I don't know why I find it so useful, but it is a neat feature nonetheless. So it's pretty slow. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait until this last car passes. Now I'm gonna cross the road here, give it some altitude, and we're going across the way here. So we're going straight out off this way. This is like an abandoned driving range here. This is a rung of power lines as far as the eye can see. So, and this is actually an old abandoned golf cart repair area here, which I've always wanted to fly here. It actually looks pretty neat. Look at this. This would be cool as shit to fly actually. So now it just toggled over to the other sensor. Yeah, this would be cool to fly actually. Something different. Can zoom in further on it. Yeah, this is where they used to repair the golf carts, I believe. I think they actually used to store the golf carts here too. So we'll zoom out so you can sort of see. Zoom works excellent. Let's go ahead and here's this little power line here. So what we can do is we can go to a split screen view and then we can view our home point. And then of course we can also zoom in on objects. So let's say we want to zoom in on some insulators on the power line here, and we can try to find one actually. Might be on the other one. Here we go, right there. Right here, a little isolator. So we can zoom in on that. You can also zoom in with the thermal sensor as well, which is pretty neat. You can do up to 16 times on the thermal. Now again, at 640 by 512 resolution, probably shouldn't be zooming in incredibly too much, but I mean, you can do it if you need to in a pinch. And then of course, if we want to go back and expand to our main sensor, we can do that. You have dual screen where we can have IR and the RGB, or you can go back to a triple screen, which will show you your waypoint, your home point, or you can just go right back to the RGB sensor, which is pretty nice. So overall, pretty impressive. Flies fantastic. Really does fly fantastic. Now, mind you, I'm in an area where there's a lot of electromagnetic interference, and I'm not getting any real breakup. Now I'm directly over this power line, like sort of straddling the center of it here. And no issue. Now I am pretty high above it, so I mean, in theory, it shouldn't really have any bearing on the performance, but safety-wise, I'm dead center of the line here, which is pretty cool. So flight-wise, it looks good. I do still see some horizon tilt, but again, I'm really not gonna be too critical on that, simply because this is not something that I'm doing, you know, for a cinematic standpoint. This is something we're looking at for mostly search and rescue, reconnaissance type of stuff. So there's my vehicle there, and I am stationed just to the back of the truck. Now I'm gonna flip on the AI tracking again. I just wanna see if it can detect me as a subject walking. And it's having a hard, there it goes. So it's actually detecting me, and it's actually detected somebody else. It actually thinks that pillar is a person, it's not. It detected me for a brief moment. Let's see if I zoom in, if it'll, yeah. So if I zoom in, it redetects me, which is pretty nice. So that AI tracking is really interesting. I can see that being very useful for law enforcement. Well, the law enforcement that are allowed to use Autel, of course. I can definitely see that being super, super handy. Being able to track subjects, you know, basically on a dime, essentially. I mean, overall, the new Enterprise interface is very similar to DJI Enterprise. Let's see if we can zip across this road before any traffic starts moving. Seems like everybody's at a stoplight. There we go. So yeah, overall, pretty good. Gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with this. The image is not anything to be too ecstatic about. Again, most of that's really because Enterprise camera, you know, there's not a lot of thought into color science. I know people were questioning that. That's not what this is for. So this is more or less just simply for the ability for inspection purposes, search and rescue, law enforcement, things of that nature. So again, keep that in mind when you're looking at this image. And like the skies are sort of blown out. Like I said, I can adjust all of that by just sort of bringing down the brightness in the image. It lets you do that. Again, it just has everything in simplified values. So for the screen, the image, it's brightness, where that would typically be ISO. I mean, for somebody who's just working at this for law enforcement specifically, ISO doesn't matter. You don't need to know those values. You just want to know that you can basically make things brighter when you need to or darker when you need to, essentially, and that definitely allows you to do it. Overall, we've been flying. We started out with, I think, about 90%. We're down to 61%. So again, having a heavier aircraft will have its pros and cons. It flies fantastic, but it's going to damper the battery a little bit. I really do love this map. Now, if I was connected to the internet, this map would also allow me to download things and see the physical layout of the land. We would be able to see roadways, things of that nature, which would be pretty useful in this instance. I'm just gonna go ahead and expand this. Again, you can do one tap exposure. You can see I'm tapping the sky to bring it back to a much more usable standpoint. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. Sometimes we've had some situations where there's been some homeless people in there. I don't see anybody there. Let's turn AI recognition on. Again, it sometimes gets things wrong. Like here's somebody riding a bike. It's getting that right. It's got me in the right corner. It's got this vehicle. That's all correct. But it sort of misreads people more than it does vehicles. It's supposed to read a couple of different types of objects. So let's see what else it reads. See, it's got that traffic light as a person. That's definitely not a person. So pretty interesting, but it does a really good job of picking up the vehicles. I really do like that. Now we do have waypoints emissions. However, those aspects are not functioning at this time as of right now. There are some things that they still have to work through and get fixed. So, you know, keep that in mind. There are some things that are not fully baked right now, but I think that's okay. It's a brand new application. And from what I can see, it's a lot simpler to use than the DJI Enterprise app. I really like some of these features. Like up top here in the right-hand corner, you can go ahead and add shortcut items. Like you can remove things like if you didn't want the laser rangefinder or the auxiliary or the beacon, or if like I didn't want waypoints or missions to be up there, I can go ahead and remove those from my top menu system here. Which I like. I like the ability to declutter that, make it a little bit more simplistic and seamless. Again, we have the laser rangefinder, which I find to be pretty accurate so far. This is coming up with, let's see, how far is it from me to the aircraft? Roughly about 153 meters. And my distance right now from me is 168. So take that for what it is. And that's actually 168, that's coming up with 184 meters. So accuracy wise, really tough to really judge which one's more accurate, whether it be the laser or the actual drone. I still think that's pretty interesting though. We can turn that off obviously. So yeah, overall, I think that this flies really well. It's really nice to see that they've invested, you know, the time and effort into tuning the flight characteristics. I gotta say, it's very, very quiet. Let's see how well it brakes. I'm going full tilt, and yeah, it stops pretty good. It stops actually really fast, to be honest with you. So we got, what do we got out here? Oh, this is more golf course out this way. Give it a little bit more altitude. I gotta say, this is really, really, really smooth. I mean, overall, just look how stable this is. I mean, there's a little bit of wind here, but this thing is unfazed overall. Now, it does have that obstacle avoidance, so it's not gonna let it get too close to the vehicle. But I mean, overall, very, very stable. All right, so what did you think about that flight with the EVO Max 4T? Personally, I think it did really well. For the very first time that I got a chance to really fly it, I wanted to keep the flight as safe as I possibly could. I wanted to keep it in an area where if something should have happened, I could easily recover it. A lot of times with most drones, I fly them out over water for the very first time because if they go down, no big deal. It's not gonna hurt anything or anybody. But with $9,000 on the line, essentially, I want to keep it in an area where I have the best chance to retrieve it should something have happened. But I will say I'm very, very impressed with the overall flight characteristics of this drone. It has been much improved. The yaw feels so much better. It feels so much more refined. Just the way this drone felt in the air, it feels more mature. I guess that's the best way I can really put it. Camera quality aside, because the camera quality is really not what we're about. I'm looking at image detail, I'm looking at how it exposes in the shadows for a subject, and I think it did all of those things very well. Obviously, Autel's never been known for color science, but we can't judge that in this video because this is an enterprise aircraft, so keep that in mind. The AI subject tracking, I think, is pretty awesome, and probably one of the most underrated features of the Max 4T. And thanks to that new processor, it's able to identify subjects a lot more easily. You can see it can identify vehicles, humans, although sometimes it doesn't get the humans quite right. I still think it's a step in the right direction, and that can definitely improve over time as they start fine-tuning that algorithm, but very impressive. Obviously, waypoints and missions are not functioning as of yet, but as soon as it does function, I'll have a separate video testing out those abilities with the new Enterprise app. And then of course we have the thermals, which we really didn't get a good chance to really test because it is sunlight out. This is not the best environment for thermals. So I will have a part 2 of this video flying at night because this does have a dedicated beacon, so we can fly this legally at night. We can test out the thermal capabilities, and we can also test out the night mode that this offers as well, because there's this night mode. So it'll be really interesting to see how that does at night. But overall, first flight, very, very impressed. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments down in the description down below. Does this sway you from thinking about purchasing another enterprise aircraft? I think that this is going to be a very well-balanced competitor in the market space for 2023. I think they did a fantastic job of producing something that has good size, good flight characteristic, and good features and benefits all built into a very compact and what I would say, dare I say, affordable price point at $8,900 with a laser rangefinder. Again, this is the only enterprise aircraft of this caliber, this size, with a laser rangefinder under $14,000. So pretty cool stuff. Anyways, I'll be in the comments for a little bit answering any and all of your questions. I'll see you in the next video. Stay original.